Pre-order bonuses are the absolute worst. They're expensive. Publishers make promises they can't keep, content gets cut from games and sold back to players at a higher price, and games get abandoned in early access, leaving players with unfinished, buggy messes.
Where did all the really cool pre-order bonuses go?
Free football for pre-ordering Assassin's Creed 4 at Best Buy.
This is garbage. This is unacceptable.
No pre-orders. No pre-orders.
But things weren't always like this. There was a time when pre-orders came with cool collectibles and real rewards. A time when games came on physical discs, and if you wanted to buy one, you had to lace up your sneakers and go to the store.
Welcome to EV Games.
In this bygone era, selling video games was a much riskier venture for publishers. There was no reliable way to track online interest or public discourse, and until a game actually released, it could feel uncertain whether or not it was going to perform. To help gauge early on how much interest there was in a game, retailers and publishers would collaborate to let players, quote, pre-order their games, reserving a copy for release day and ensuring there would be enough stock when the player got to the store. To help sweeten the deal, retailers started throwing in bonus rewards to help sell more copies. Super Mario Bros. 3, released in 1988, is one of the earliest examples. To drum up hype for the game, retailers would offer free stickers and posters and bundle them with all pre-orders. Toys R Us even threw in a free copy of Nintendo Power, which is an old gaming magazine for those too young to remember. These early campaigns were incredibly effective, and Super Mario Bros. 3 received more than 250,000 pre-orders worldwide. With the concept proven, publishers started taking the reins when it came to pre-order campaigns. Square offered CDs and t-shirts when promoting Final Fantasy VII, Nintendo shipped Ocarina of Time with the famous gold cartridge in 1998, and throughout the 2000s the trend continued, with Fable shipping bonus DVDs and Mario Kart Double Dash coming with a demo disc. Before long, pre-order bonuses started to evolve from small pieces of collectible memorabilia to sought-after prizes that could be just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the game itself. If you go on eBay today, you'll see a lot of retro games listed for hundreds of dollars. But in some cases, worth even more is the pre-order bonus that was bundled with them. For example, Pokemon Colosseum came with a bonus disc that allowed players to connect their GameCube to their Game Boy Advance and receive the legendary Pokemon Jirachi as a gift in Pokemon Ruby or Sapphire. This super cool transmedial crossover felt futuristic at the time, and today, the bonus disc is worth upwards of $400. Seeing just how much players valued pre-order bonuses, many publishers started leaning into the hype, creating deluxe editions of their games and bundling them with even more tantalizing rewards. Halo 3's Legendary Edition, which cost a whopping $130 USD, came with a life-size Master Chief helmet and stand. Modern Warfare 2's Prestige Edition, $150, came with a functional pair of night vision goggles. For obvious reasons, these are lauded as some of the coolest, most sought-after pre-order bonuses of all time, and they fulfilled their purpose: selling copies. Halo 3 had 1.7 million pre-orders, and Modern Warfare 2 had an estimated 3.5 million pre-orders, due in no small part to the aggressive marketing campaign leading up to their releases. But it's important to remember that video game publishers ultimately only want one thing: your money. For every pre-order bonus that was considered incredible, there were 100 others that simply didn't hit the mark. Many AAA publishers completely cheaped out on their promised rewards, using the hype as a cash grab and failing to follow through on their promises. Gears of War 2 had a remote-controlled Centaur tank that was basically guaranteed to break on arrival. Street Fighter 4 came with these little wrestling thumb puppets that were incredibly cheap. And AC Black Flag gave players an American football? But one of the worst offenders of all time was for the $200 Power Armor edition of Fallout 76. This bundle promised a ton of different things, one of which was this cool canvas duffel bag that players were super excited for. Unfortunately, when it arrived, all players got was a cheap nylon sack, with Bethesda saying the reduced quality was due to material costs. As a sorry, they offered 500 atoms, roughly equal to $5, as penance for their dishonesty. But the internet exploded, dragging the company for shorting top-tier backers and even floating threats of legal action. After 6 months, Bethesda agreed to ship real canvas bags to all the players who ordered them. Today, however, physical rewards have become much less prominent. Games don't get physical releases, so why create physical media? Heading into the 2010s, publishers quickly realized that pre-order bonuses were popular, not necessarily because people wanted the reward, but because they were afraid of missing out. FOMO was the real driving force behind most pre-order sales, and it didn't really matter if the bonus was physical or digital. So, most decided to go the cost-effective route. Star Wars: The Old Republic gave players digital codes, which could be redeemed to access various perks, including getting into the game 1 week before its official launch, or receiving color stones used to customize lightsabers. Usually, these codes were purely aesthetic, but some games took things a little further, including in-game gear as a pre-order bonus. Mass Effect 2 shipped with the Mattock Assault Rifle, Borderlands 2 gave players golden guns, but some games took it a little too far. Dead Space 3 notoriously shipped with armor suits and the Negotiator weapon, both of which made early sections of the game much easier than the devs had intended, ultimately undermining the survival horror experience that many had come to expect from the franchise. Still, these controversies were minor, and publishers saw an opportunity to make a little more money. Seeing that players were willing, even excited to pay for limited edition gear, retailers started competing with each other for control over players' wallets. They'd partner with publishers to offer bonuses that could only be received if you bought from a certain store, and slowly but surely, pre-order bonuses started becoming more and more tied to where you bought your games from. Batman: Arkham City is an early and controversial example. Robin was a playable character, but you could only access him if you pre-ordered from Best Buy. Players were rightfully upset that Batman's beloved sidekick was tied to a retailer-specific perk, and if you bought the game from any other store, you wouldn't be able to play the character. A more egregious example was Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Here, you could choose to imbue your sword with the Flame of Anor, available exclusively at Best Buy, or you could take aim with the Dearly Archer rune, exclusive to Amazon, and if neither of those tickled your fancy, you could go for the Rising Storm rune, earned by braving the harshest land in all of Middle-earth, Walmart. Not only did players have to choose between 3 retailers, but that choice would literally alter their in-game experience. It might have been low impact, but being locked out of content still sucks, as 2 of the runes in the game would simply be not available. But this was nothing compared to what Ubisoft was about to do. 2013's Watch Dogs, a game that really doesn't need any more controversy, cranked scummy digital pre-orders to 11. Literally. There were 11 different versions of Watch Dogs to choose from, each featuring different unique content that was neither found in the base game nor other versions. For example, if you pre-ordered the DedSec edition from Amazon, you would have a wildly different gameplay experience than if you bought the Vigilante edition from Target. We're not talking just small cosmetics, we're talking in-game missions and even perks that affected gameplay. And unless you went out and bought all 11 versions to try, you'd never get that full Watch Dogs experience. Which is one of the reasons why pre-order bonuses have such a bad rep. They don't really enhance player experience, just detract from it. Why couldn't all of the features spread out across all of these different versions just release in one definitive edition without players having to spend more money? Despite these tactics, or perhaps due to them, all 3 of the games we just talked about sold incredibly well. Publishers cutting content from games and selling it back to the players was actually boosting sales. And despite many comments online lamenting that publishers were locking content behind pre-orders, the outrage was often forgotten as soon as the game was released. So, as publishers do, they started getting bolder, pushing the boundaries of what could rightfully be called a pre-order bonus, and carving out characters and missions from finished games to sell back to players as a reward. We already talked about Batman: Arkham City, but its sequel, Arkham Knight, ramped up things even further. Scarecrow skins and missions were PS4 exclusive, Harley Quinn was a pre-order bonus, and Red Hood was a GameStop exclusive pre-order. All of these were playable characters with unique missions who could have been given to all players for free, but were instead rationed out to us like Oliver Twist begging for scraps.
Please, sir, I want some more.
What?
The question is, why? Why treat the players as secondary, and who is making these decisions? Well, I'll tell you right off the bat, it's not the developers. Let's take a look at Metro Last Light. Developed by 4A and originally published by THQ, Metro Last Light had a hardcore difficulty setting called Ranger Mode, which catered to veteran fans of the series as a challenge beyond what most players would experience. But after THQ went bankrupt and Deep Silver took over publishing, Ranger Mode was cut out of the base game and instead included as a pre-order bonus. Obviously, fans were furious.
You do not take the heart, basically the heart of the game, out of the game and make somebody pay $5 or pre-purchase the game. It's stupid.
But Koch Media's global brand manager, Hugh Bainan, doubled down on the decision, saying, quote, offering game content as a pre-order exclusive is a requirement. Ranger Mode seemed like the best choice since it was a mode for hardcore fans who would most likely pre-order the game. Let that sink in. They specifically cut out one of the most anticipated features of the game to trap hardcore fans. Despite telling forums that they did not, quote, force players to pre-order, the fact is, they did. They knew exactly what they were doing. The same thing happened with Evolve in 2015. Developed by Turtle Rock Studios, the team behind Left 4 Dead, Evolve was criticized for being incredibly light on content at launch, with very few characters or maps. Despite this, the game had an aggressive marketing campaign
Evolve is no joke. This is a gamer's game
that revolved around pre-order bonuses. The base game had 12 hunters and 3 monsters, but the PC Monster Race version, if pre-ordered, had 18 hunters and 5 monsters, a few of which would come from future DLC. It felt like almost half the game was cut out and tacked on later as a reward for pre-ordering and spending more money. And after the game flopped, developers came out and publicly shamed 2K for pushing them to cut the content in the first place.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Frankly, it's ridiculous we let it get this far. Unfortunately, players vote with their wallets, and pre-ordering was proven to work. That is, until one publisher took it to an extreme we'd never seen before. In 2015, Deus Ex: Mankind Divided was slated to be the latest cyberpunk RPG from Square Enix. Famous for exploring themes of transhumanism and the growing power of megacorporations, Square Enix decided to try a new way to reward players for buying in early. It was called Augment Your Pre-Order. It was a tiered system of rewards which would unlock higher tiers as more people ordered. On the surface, it was a unique AR marketing campaign that fit the theme of the game. The only issue is that as the tiers progressed, players would be asked to pick one option out of a set to personalize the rewards they'd receive. The first tier had you choose one of 3 agent packs for the game. The second tier had you choose between a digital art book and a soundtrack sampler. And the fourth tier had you choose between a digital comic book or a novella. Unfortunately, instead of feeling like we were personalizing our pre-order to our tastes, it felt more like choosing which content we were going to throw away forever. To make things worse, the third tier was access to an exclusive mission, yet another example of cutting out already existing content and marketing it as a perk. To top it all off, the collector's edition of the game came with everything we just listed, but it cost an absurd $140. The backlash was immediate. Square Enix quickly canned the system, giving the bonuses to everyone. But this whole fiasco led people to question what the point of pre-order bonuses were in the first place and if they were really necessary. One of the most popular pre-order incentives used by many games was granting players early access. Basically, buy in before the game gets released and we'll let you play a day or two early. Sounds like a sweet deal, right? When it works, it's great. But surprisingly, this added incentive was a lot harder to get right than you'd expect, and even AAA games completely let fans down with how they handled game launches. Released in 2014, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare had a Day Zero edition of the game that players could pre-order for a markup. This would grant 2 exclusive weapons, double XP, a cosmetic exoskeleton skin, and the ability to play on Day Zero 24 hours early. It might not sound like much, but when you're in high school, getting to play the new Call of Duty game a full day earlier than all your friends is kind of a big deal. Following the Day Zero Edition Gamescom announcement, the game saw a 385% spike in pre-order numbers. This was around the same time that games like Destiny and Grand Theft Auto 5 were reaching 4 million plus pre-orders. So this was kind of a big deal. Unfortunately, when it came time for the game to launch, players tried to log in, but instead of getting to experience the game early, they were met with server crashes that kicked them out over and over and over again.
Day Zero Edition issues. Can't play multiplayer.
With players completely locked out of the game, the main draw of the Day Zero edition was basically useless, sparking conversations about the ethics of pre-orders as a whole. This was a recurring issue. It would happen with Diablo 3, Payday 3, Battlefield 2042. Repeatedly, games that were upsold with the promise of early access didn't bother to test their servers ahead of time, and players who pre-ordered to play the game early were left high and dry. But still, the allure was too strong. Early access would become one of the most popular pre-order perks for games large and small. So much so that some games, primarily indie games, would release in an unfinished state, putting out updates as development continued. These were called early access games. For companies who didn't have the resources for traditional playtesting, they could put out the game and get fans to do it for them. They'd also use the money from people buying the game early to help fund development. As more people paid for early access, the more resources devs would have to pour into the game. It was a win-win situation, and games like Hades, Subnautica, Kerbal Space Program, and Factorio are just a few examples of early access done to perfection. Unfortunately, not all early access games are success stories. Some developers used a title as a way to avoid releasing their game at all, staying in early access for years. This is great for developers because any bugs or issues that get reported can be written off since the game is still in development, but it's terrible for players since there's no guarantee the devs will actually address the issues. Not only that, if a developer decides they simply don't want to work on a game anymore, people can get stuck with an unfinished product they paid full price for. DayZ is a great example, remaining in early access for 5 years with very little dev communication on when it would be finished. The Stomping Land had a huge Kickstarter campaign in 2014, went into early access which brought in a ton of cash, and then vanished in 2015, running off with the money and leaving players with a completely broken game. Thankfully, there is some security for players who pre-order games and don't get what they're promised. When a game is in development, the team will make promises of what the game is going to be about and all the cool features they're going to implement. No Man's Sky from 2016 is a game that made tons of promises about being the largest game ever created, but when it launched, it was a buggy mess, lacking 90% of what had been promised, and it was clear that the developers had lied.
Sort of.
Estimated at around 500,000 pre-orders, many players started issuing refunds, citing misleading marketing and the game being unfinished. It didn't take long for No Man's Sky to become the poster child for why you shouldn't pre-order games, especially from independent developers without a proven track record. But any developer, not just indie ones, are capable of screwing over consumers with pre-orders. EA's Anthem, released in 2019, had a huge marketing campaign that tried to reel in players with exclusive perks. The various editions of the game offered different cosmetics and weapons, and all pre-orders gave players access to the VIP demo, as well as giving players who subscribed to Origin early access or a 10-hour trial. Unfortunately, the VIP demo, which gave players access to the game a month in advance, was basically a loading screen simulator with bonus game-crashing DLC. Many couldn't even log in to get to the loading screen. It felt like a total cash grab, with EA hyping up tons of features and failing to deliver. Needless to say, the refunds came flooding in, and today, Anthem is one of the most infamous pre-order disasters of all time. Nowadays, pre-order bonuses are kind of a joke. You can still buy collector's editions, which usually ship with tons of physical goodies that justify the price tag, but most games simply ship out with a digital deluxe edition and call it a day. Cyberpunk 2077, Anthem Legion of Dawn edition, every Call of Duty release in the last 5 years. In our opinion, these simply aren't worth it. Compared to 20 years ago, when pre-ordering got you in-game tie-ins, incredible pieces of gear, and appropriately themed cans of Mountain Dew, now you just get bunny ears for your Spartan or whatever anime skin they're throwing in for Call of Duty. So, the next time you see a flashy pre-order deal pop up, take a breath. Think about if it's worth it or not, and go from there. Is it really worth the money you're about to spend? Or is the pre-order bonus not that much of a bonus at all?